pleasure. Thank you.
All right, over in Pennsylvania, counties there have until Wednesday to begin the recount for Pennsylvania's Senate seat as Bob Casey still refuses to concede the race to Senator-elect Dave McCormick. This as Utah Senator Mike Lee says, quote, if Bob Casey doesn't concede, Pennsylvania keeps counting illegal votes and Casey relies on those votes to claim victory. The Senate could refuse to seat him. Mark Harris is the McCormick campaign's lead strategist, and he joins me now. Mark, good morning to you. So I want to get to Senator Lee's comments in just a moment. But first, this recount is happening. So are there any concerns when it comes to the outcome of this recount from the McCormick camp?
Well, look, we are concerned about what some of the counties are engaging in, which is clearly an effort to help Bob Casey. There's Bucks County, Montgomery County, who are involved in the unlawful acts of counting unlawful ballots. So, yes, we are concerned about that aspect, but ultimately, we're up tens of thousands of votes. Dave McCormick is the senator-elect. We're going to come through the recount in the lead. We are going to win. But, you know, it's quite frankly unconscionable that these counties are engaging in this behavior. And so that's why we've been very clear from the beginning about holding them accountable. Our legal teams, the RNC, the NRSC, we're going to hold all these counties accountable for their actions because these election officials need to follow the law. Okay. The Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, which is, by the way, controlled by Democrats, has laid out what the law is. We're just asking these counties to follow it. And unfortunately, 2 and possibly more counties have decided they aren't going to do that. And so we're going to fight to hold them accountable every day.
I hear you.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about the insurrectionist Democrat Party out in a few liberal counties in Pennsylvania, in which you currently have Democrats trying to overturn an election that they lost by counting illegal ballots. Yes, the state Supreme Court had ruled that, hey, there's some ballots that cannot be counted, mail-in ballots, if they're not filled out properly. Like, for example, if they have the incorrect date on the ballot, or if they don't have a date at all, then they can't be counted. Now, they ruled in favor of Republicans, and the ruling, it's just common sense, okay? When you're talking about mailing in ballots, you want to make sure that the ballot is dated properly or that it has a date, and the reason why is because you don't want people mailing in ballots after the deadline, right? Like, for example, you don't want people mailing in ballots after Election Day, okay, and having those votes be counted because, again, they would have voted after Election Day. Again, this is just common sense. But the Democrat Party is not the party of common sense. They are the party of far-left authoritarianism, okay? And this story right here is far-left Democrat Party authoritarianism taken to the extreme because they are openly admitting, the Democrats out in counties like, for example, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, they're saying, well, yeah, we're going to continue to count the illegal ballots despite the rulings from the court. And that's just what we're going to do, right? We're going to do it because we currently want to overturn the election from Republican Dave McCormick, who is beating Bob Casey in that state Senate race. I mean, he's basically won the race, okay? All of the major outlets have declared the race over. However, there will be a recount because his margin is extremely small, right? I think it's like 1% or maybe even less than 1%. It's like 15,000 votes or something like that. It's an extremely small margin. There will be a recount, but effectively the race as of right now is over, except Bob Casey, the Democrat, is refusing to concede, right? He said, no, I'm not going to concede, right? I'm not going to concede. I am going to stay in the race. I am going to try to overturn this election using illegal ballots. Again, Democrats are openly admitting out loud that they're doing this despite the orders from the court. Take a look.
Officials are now openly admitting to counting disqualified ballots in the Pennsylvania Senate race. It is open defiance of the state's Supreme Court, which instructed them not to do this on November 1st. And Democrat Bob Casey refuses to concede the election to Dave McCormick as the $1 million recount gets underway this week. Alexis McAdams has the latest. Alexis.
Hey, Kaylee. Well, people at home are wondering what is going on in Pennsylvania because people thought this race wrapped up days ago. But hey, not everyone thinks the Senate race is over in Pennsylvania. That includes Democrats on some election boards who admit they're breaking the rules to overturn the results. But Democrats say throwing out those votes because of clerical orders just violates Second Amendment rights. That's why they're doing it. They say, watch.
It is a pretty stupid thing to not count someone's vote simply because they didn't, date an envelope for a ballot when we know specifically for that person when it was printed. We have a pretty good approximate date of when it was mailed to them.
Election officials in at least 4 counties, Bucks, Philadelphia Center, and Montgomery, openly defying that ruling. In Bucks County, the Democrat-led Election Commission Board voted to count 405 ballots with date errors.
Precedent by a court doesn't matter anymore in this country, and people violate laws anytime they want. So for me, if I violate this law, it's because I want a court to pay attention to it. And there is nothing more important than counting votes.
The blatant flouting of the law sparking outrage. The liberal Washington Post editorial board saying Democrats are thumbing their nose at the rule of law, calling it, quote, corrosive to democracy. Conservative commentator Jonathan Turley writing in an op-ed that Democrats are dropping any pretense of protecting democracy over partisanship.
Essentially, this is election denialism of the kind that Democrats have been attacking Donald Trump for doing in the past.
Pennsylvania's other senator, Democrat John Fetterman, downplaying the Democratic counties flouting the courts.
It's very, very close, and I guarantee you, if Dave McCormick were in the opposite situation where he was down 15 to 17,000 votes, he would absolutely want to have every last vote counted as well, too. And Bob Casey has never claimed fraud.
But it comes days after the race was called for Republican Senator-elect Dave McCormick after he beat out incumbent Democratic Senator Bob Casey. But Casey will still not concede days later. So now this week, the race is heading for a recount, and it's going to be expensive, you guys. It's going to cost taxpayers $1 million. Some blue counties say they're now counting ballots that do not have those required signatures or those dates, which is against the law. And that's according to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which ruled that weeks ago. Now the RNC and McCormick's teams are suing at least 4 Pennsylvania counties. So as that goes on, we're also seeing that Senate Majority Leader-elect John Thune of South Dakota is calling on Casey to concede, as Democrat Senator John Fetterman says he thinks his counterpart is going to do the right thing. But the question is, when is that going to happen? McCormick's team says it's business as usual for them, so he's going forward with orientation in D.C. and making new hires, says he's looking forward to his Senate seat. So we'll see what happens, Kaylee.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Now, first and foremost, I want to say this, okay? John Fetterman, sometimes he makes a lot of sense, right? And I'm glad to see him clearly recovering, okay, from the stroke. But there's other times where clearly he is still experiencing some issues, right? And I think that this is one of those times.
What's your take? What's your response to that Democratic official deliberately announcing that they're going to defy court orders and count these provisional ballots?
Well, I'm not going to chase every kinds of quotes, things like that, because I think you just pointed out that it refers to about 115 ballots, and that's not going to have an impact on this race at this point. So where we are now? It's very, very close, and I guarantee you, if Dave McCormick were in the opposite situation where he was down 15 to 17,000 votes, he would absolutely want to have every last vote counted as well, too. And Bob Casey has never claimed fraud. And I think it's really interesting now, all of the Republicans and the conservative people on Twitter aren't talking about, oh, they're cheating, they're having all kinds of a thing after Trump won. No one's claiming that there's any kinds of actual cheating on our side. You know, calling and counting every vote, and that's where we're at. And that's the law. And when it's finished, and if Bob Casey comes up short, I can almost guarantee you that he's going to do the right thing and concede. So that's the thing. But my point, no one's making an argument that there's any kinds of cheating or thing on our side. It's like, hey, we're going to count every last vote.
Yeah, so this is an extremely silly take from John Fetterman, and it really shows you guys how much Democrats are hypocrites when it comes to this issue of democracy, right? Because, again, what you have here is a Democrat refusing to give up. And hey, look, that's fine, right? If he wants a recount, that's cool, right? I don't really have that much of a problem with that because I want to make sure that every legal vote is counted. But in this situation, what John Fetterman is refusing to acknowledge is that there should be no illegal votes counted at all, right? It doesn't matter if it's one. That's still a vote. And when you're talking about doing a recount, when you're talking about trying to figure out who won an election in which it is extremely close, let's say that the margin becomes a lot thinner than it is right now. And there's already a pretty thin margin. But if the margin becomes a lot thinner, then it possibly could come down to those few hundred or so illegal votes, right? That is what it could come down to if the result of the recount makes the race even closer, right? We don't know. We don't know. So why would you accept this at all? Why don't you just come out and say this is wrong and that this is unacceptable? We want all legal votes to count. We don't want illegal votes to count. And that's it, right? That is what you should be saying, okay? But instead, no. What they try to do is that they try to justify the unjustifiable, right? Listen to these Democrats. They sound like insurrectionists to me, okay? They're saying, well, we don't care what the court says. We're going to count the votes anyways, right? This is what they're saying. Now, what I found to be fascinating about this, well, it's where did they get this from, right? Think about it. Where did they get this from? Where did Democrats get the idea that it is okay to openly defy the court when the court rules against them? Maybe, just maybe, this is a result of all of the rhetoric that Democrats have spewed in this country when it comes to court rulings that they don't like, right? Anytime there's a ruling from the court that they don't like, they basically call to overthrow the court. Screw the Supreme Court, right? We don't like their rulings, therefore it should be abolished, right? Or we should pack the courts because we can't get our way. The Biden administration has went out of their way to routinely ignore Supreme Court rulings that they disagree with. Like, for example, the student loan debt relief scam, right? Biden routinely ignored the Supreme Court when it came to that. They ignored the Supreme Court when it came to the whole vaccine mandates and stuff like that. They ignored the Supreme Court when it came to the rent moratorium. There are multiple times during his administration in which Democrats said it's totally fine to ignore the Supreme Court, to ignore the courts if we don't like their rulings. And guess what this has resulted in? It has resulted in these Democrats becoming emboldened enough to say, you know what? We're going to do that here too. We're just going to ignore the court. Screw the court. We don't like their ruling. We're going to do what we want. We're going to count the votes anyways. Who gives a damn, right? That is the precedent that Democrats have set in this country. That is the type of authoritarianism that has become commonplace and normalized in this country via Biden and Kamala Harris' administration, right? Again, this didn't happen under Trump. This type of normalization of ignoring court rulings did not happen under Trump. It happened under Democrats. Biden routinely said, screw the courts. Now you got other Democrats following behind him, doing the exact same thing, trying to essentially overthrow an election that they lost. That's what they're trying to do. What other reason do they have? What other reason do they have? And, you know, it's just funny to me how all the so-called democracy crusaders at MSNBC, they're silent about this. They ain't really got nothing to say about it, right? They're not talking about this on their network. Where's Nancy Pelosi? Where are all the top Democrats that claim that they're fighting on behalf of democracy and that this type of thing is unacceptable, right? Where are all those people at? They're silent. They ain't got nothing to say about it. Almost as if they never actually really gave a damn about it. Almost as if democracy actually doesn't mean what democracy actually means. What it means to them is Democrat power and control, right? Democrats are fighting for power and control. They don't give a damn about democracy at all. And stories like this are exactly what I'm talking about. It's exactly what I'm talking about. They show you time and time and time again, they are the party of authoritarianism. They're the ones that are trying to have a dictatorship. They're the ones that don't care about the rule of law. They don't care. They will do anything to maintain power and control. And here you have the consequences of what Democrats have normalized in this country. Now you're saying other Democrats do it at the local level. This is what they're doing. Radicalized Democrats. So, like I said, I support the recount. I think that all the legal votes should be counted, right? That's fair. What I don't support is Democrats counting illegal votes, okay? And at this point, Democrats, again, they're showing you exactly who they are, and that all that rhetoric against Trump and that whole democracy nonsense they were talking about, it was all projection. It was all projection. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.